Real men don't explain themselves just to be accepted. They don't chase arguments to prove a point, and when they're disrespected, they don't explode. They observe. They step back. They let silence speak for them. Because nothing cuts deeper than a man who doesn't flinch. The one who owns the frame is the one who doesn't need to defend it. This isn't weakness, it's precision, it's presence. And this is how real men deal with disrespect, not with noise, but with quiet, unshakable power. Arguing is a loss of position, not a show of strength. The moment a man steps into an argument, he steps out of his frame, not because words are weak, but because reaction is. Arguing is the behavior of a man who's already on defense. It's what happens when you start valuing being right more than being rooted. When you feel the need to convince, to explain, to prove, to set the record straight, you've already lost something deeper than the point you're trying to make. You've lost your position. You've lowered yourself. You've stepped out of presence and into performance. And in that performance, you surrender control. Not just of the moment, but of yourself. Because now you're no longer leading the energy, you're matching it. And what you match, you validate. Arguing is not leadership. It is negotiation with chaos. And a man doesn't negotiate his presence. He doesn't argue with emotional bait. He doesn't let tone, volume, or disrespect pull him out of alignment. He observes. He decides. And if the space no longer reflects his standard, he exits. Not to avoid conflict, but to win it in the only way that matters, through control of self. That's what makes a man powerful, not his words, but his refusal to waste them on what doesn't deserve them. When you argue, you say, your opinion has weight. When you argue, you admit, this situation controls my nervous system. But when you go still, when you go quiet, when you walk instead of react, you deliver a message that can't be twisted, misquoted, or ignored. That message is simple. I do not participate in energy beneath me. You don't prove your value. You embody it. And those who cannot recognize it are simply not meant to be near it. Your power isn't in proving your truth, it's in living it. And when you walk in that truth without flinching, without apologizing, without defending, the world begins to organize itself around your presence. The wrong people fall away. The right ones lean in, not because you chased approval, but because you commanded respect through stillness. That's the real polarity. That's the unshakable masculine energy a woman feels before you ever open your mouth. Understand this. Arguing is the bait. It is the first test of whether you are self-led or other-led. Whether you can hold your frame while someone throws emotional chaos at your feet. Whether you can stay rooted in clarity without needing to be understood. Most men fail this test. They get loud. They get triggered. They try to fix, to correct, to control. But the man who's done the work, who has structure in his mind and order in his breath, he sees the play before it starts. He doesn't rise. He doesn't explain. He doesn't match noise with noise. He simply leaves the battlefield entirely. Because he knows what every truly powerful man knows. The second you argue, you've made someone else's chaos your problem. You were not born to explain your worth. You were born to walk in it. You don't argue with noise. You remove your energy from it. That removal is power. That silence is weight. That detachment is what makes people think twice before speaking sideways in your direction again. Not because they fear your reaction, but because they know it won't come. That is what makes your presence untouchable. That is what keeps your respect intact, not just in their eyes, but in your own. So don't yell. Don't match. Don't explain. Just walk. Calm. Clear. Complete. Let the silence carry your message. This is not my battlefield. And you are not my opponent. Silence is your sword. Every man is tested, not with fair challenges, but with bait, with jabs disguised as jokes, with provocations dressed up as questions, with disrespect layered in tone, in timing, in posture. The test isn't what's said, it's how you respond. Because what the world wants, what the insecure crave, is your reaction, your spike of emotion, your defense. You need to reclaim the moment with louder words. But the man who reacts is the man who has already lost. He's been pulled into someone else's rhythm. He's allowed his energy to be directed instead of chosen. That's not leadership, that's submission. And the moment you submit your attention to a disrespectful exchange, you've told the world that your center is negotiable. But there is another way, a rarer way, the way of the quiet edge. the way of the man who has trained himself to see everything but respond to nothing unless he chooses, the man who has felt the heat rise in his chest but does not let it spill through his mouth, the man who can be insulted, misread, disrespected and not blink, not because he is weak, but because he is centered. That man is not cold, he is controlled, and his silence is not absence, it is dominance in its most refined form. Silence is not avoidance, it's not passivity, it's not fear of confrontation, it's the opposite, it's mastery of confrontation. It's understanding that true power is not proven through noise, but through non-reactivity. You don't raise your voice, you don't match disrespect with defense, you don't explain your worth to people who already know they're crossing a line, they just want to see if you'll enforce it. And when you don't take the bait, when you respond with stillness, something profound happens. They are left alone with their own energy, and that silence, it's deafening to the insecure. They fidget, they squirm, they talk more, they fill the space trying to regain rhythm, but you are not moved, and that immovability becomes your most commanding presence. A man who can be still when others lose control becomes the most powerful presence in any room, not because he's intimidating, but because he is unreachable. And that silence, calm, focused, unshaken, is sharper than any retort. It's not retreat, it's not weakness, it's strategy. You look once, you say nothing, you move on, not because you didn't feel the moment, but because the moment wasn't worth your energy. And that quiet rejection, that refusal to engage, that's what reclaims the frame. That's what shifts the power. That's what commands respect without asking for it. Understand this, anyone can shout, anyone can clap back, anyone can match insult with insult, but that's not strength, that's reaction. And reaction is cheap, it's available to everyone. But silence, controlled, intentional silence, that's rare, that's a discipline. That's a sword too sharp to be seen, only felt. It slices through ego, it exposes insecurity. It says without words, you do not move me, you do not define me, you do not deserve my energy. So carry that silence like a weapon. Let it be your edge, let it be your filter, let it be the boundary that no one crosses twice. Don't use it to punish, use it to protect, use it to preserve your direction. Because the man who can remain calm, still and absolutely unbothered when provoked is not suppressing his fire, he's aiming it. And that's the kind of fire that doesn't just burn, it reshapes the room. So next time you are tested, do nothing. Look once, breathe once, say nothing, move on. Let your silence speak the one truth that words never can. This is beneath my energy, I do not respond, I lead. Walking away is not weakness, it's a dominant decision. Masculine strength isn't proven by how loud you get, how long you stay, or how hard you fight. It's proven by how quickly and cleanly you can walk away from anything that disrespects your peace. The idea that walking away is weakness, that turning your back on chaos makes you less of a man, is a myth sold to keep you emotionally reactive, constantly proving, constantly engaged in games that drain your energy and blur your vision. But true dominance has nothing to prove. It doesn't argue for dignity. It doesn't compete with noise. It doesn't stay where it's not respected. It leaves not to escape, but to elevate. Because when a man walks away, not in silence born of fear, but in stillness born of clarity, he sends a message louder than any debate could. A message that says, I don't need this moment, I don't need this space, and I sure as hell don't need your validation. That message doesn't just reclaim your power, it exposes theirs for what it is, conditional, fragile, dependent on your participation. Once you remove your presence, you remove their power, not with confrontation, with detachment, with sovereignty, with the quiet weight of a man who no longer entertains anything beneath his direction. The man who cannot walk away is a man who can be manipulated, who can be baited, who can be kept in toxic cycles by emotional hooks and wounded pride. But the man who can walk, who can exit calmly, completely, and without looking back is the man no one can control. Not because he dominates others, but because he masters himself. He doesn't chase closure. He doesn't beg to be understood. He doesn't stay in rooms just to prove he belongs there. If a space insults his spirit, he exits it, fully, without drama, without negotiation. And that exit, when it's done cleanly, is the highest form of power. Walking away isn't a tantrum. It's not a threat. It's not about punishing someone for their behavior. It's about rewarding yourself for finally seeing clearly. It's about saying, I've outgrown this pattern. I've outgrown this space. I no longer argue in places where I'm disrespected. You don't owe anyone the courtesy of your energy if they've proven they don't value it. You don't owe the moment your voice if it only wants your reaction. You owe yourself your peace, your clarity, and your unshakable standard. And that standard is not reinforced through confrontation. It's reinforced through absence. People understand presence, but they feel absence deeply. When you're no longer reachable, when your attention is gone, when your emotion is off the table, when your energy is completely removed, it forces everyone involved to face something they couldn't see when you were still responding, their own reflection. And that reflection is where growth either begins or ends, but it's no longer your concern. Because when you walk, you close the loop. You don't leave pieces of yourself scattered behind for someone else to play with. You leave with everything, fully intact, fully clear, fully done. You don't walk away because you're weak. You walk away because your standards got stronger, because your time got clearer, because your presence became more valuable than someone's comfort with crossing your boundaries. You walk because you no longer fit into the version of yourself that tolerated disrespect just to keep the peace. That's not quitting. That's graduation. And the man who graduates from chaos without needing to punish anyone for it, that man doesn't just command respect. He becomes it. So understand this. You don't have to fight to win. You don't have to shout to be heard. And you don't have to stay to prove your strength. Your ability to leave is not the absence of courage, it's the proof of it. Because the man who can walk away is the man who can never be cornered again. There is nothing more costly than giving your energy to people who haven't earned it. Yet most men do it every day. They argue with disrespect. They defend themselves to people who don't listen. They explain their value to women who already know it. They get pulled into debates, guilted into compromise, and drained by conversations that never should have started in the first place. Not because they lack strength, but because they haven't yet learned the highest expression of it: selective availability. Your energy is your frame. It is your kingdom. And if everyone can access it, no one respects it. The modern man is too open, too explainable, too easy to reach. He jumps at every message. He responds to every tone shift. He tries to clarify, repair, and redeem himself at every moment. But in doing so, he signals one thing clearly: anyone can pull me off my center. And once that's clear, once it's understood that you are always emotionally available to chaos, conflict, or disrespect, your energy is no longer trusted. Not by women, not by other men, not by yourself. Because leadership does not mean being constantly accessible. Leadership means being disciplined in your accessibility. A man must protect his attention like a gate, not with aggression, but with structure. You do not entertain disrespect. You do not argue to be understood. You do not let someone else's emotional state determine your next move. That's not compassion. That's chaos. Your energy is sacred. And if someone brings noise into your space, your job is not to fight the noise. Your job is to end access, quietly, instantly, without drama, without apology, without a single wasted sentence. You vanish not as a gain, but as a consequence. Your energy is a reward, not a right. And once that energy is removed, the lesson begins. They don't learn through lectures. They learn through absence. Because absence is where the weight of your structure is finally felt. And that structure is what shifts how people approach you. They begin to speak slower. They begin to weigh their words. They begin to think twice before bringing disorder to your door. Not because you demanded respect, but because you lived in it. That's the quiet leadership most men never discover. The kind that walks ahead and never looks back. The kind that doesn't need noise to be noticed because it's felt before it's seen. When you start protecting your energy this way, everything changes. You stop chasing closure. You stop defending your peace. You stop justifying your boundaries. People either align or disappear. Either way, your focus remains clean. Your time remains yours. And your mission becomes the filter. If someone fits into it, they move forward with you. If not, they fall away without resistance. That's not cold. That's ordered. And masculine energy at its highest level is ordered. It doesn't beg for harmony. It builds it. Through structure, through presence, through non-reactivity. Disrespect is never random. It's always a test. And your response is the answer. If you engage, you teach them that your boundaries are flexible. If you collapse, you show them that your leadership is fragile. But if you remove your energy without noise, without retaliation, without warning, you create the one thing that reshapes behavior faster than confrontation ever could. Silence backed by structure. So treat your energy like a temple. Entry is earned, behavior is filtered, and once disrespected, you don't explain. You exit, not with emotion, with clarity. Because when your presence is no longer assumed, when your time is no longer accessible, your name starts to carry a weight no words can match. That's when you stop being a man they talk to and start being the man they adjust for. The true test of masculinity is emotional discipline. Masculinity isn't about what you can lift. It's not about how much money you make, how loud you speak, or how many people fear you. That's performance. That's theater. Real masculinity lives in silence, in stillness, in restraint. It's not what you do when you're in control, it's how you move when everything around you is trying to pull you off center. And the man who can feel deeply without being led by what he feels, that man is rare. That man is dangerous, because nothing controls him. This is what most men never learn. They chase strength in the outer world. They build bodies, they stack wins, they conquer women. But inside, they're reactive, they're chaotic, they're addicted to attention, quick to anger, quick to defend, always trying to prove something. And the truth is, if your peace can be taken by someone's tone, by someone's opinion, by someone's disrespect, you're not strong. You're just covered in armor. Armor that falls apart the second someone touches your wound, and wounds that haven't been faced always leak. They leak through overreaction, through over-explaining, through needing to be seen, to be right, to be validated. But a man who's done the work, a man who's trained his nervous system, he doesn't speak to prove. He doesn't move to be liked. He doesn't argue to gain control. His control is internal. His power isn't reactive, it's responsive. Disrespect doesn't rattle him, it reveals him. It shows where ego used to live, where old insecurities still flicker. And when he sees it, he doesn't fight back. He learns, because he understands that emotional discipline isn't about shutting off emotion, it's about commanding it. Not through suppression, but through structure. You are not weak for feeling. You are weak for being led by those feelings, for letting a moment of discomfort derail your presence, for letting someone else's projection determine your identity. That's not power, that's fragility. And fragility dressed as force always collapses when pressure hits. But when you own your state, when you feel the heat rise, when you feel the pull to speak, to explain, to lash out, and instead you breathe, you observe, and you choose, you rise above the entire frame. You exit the trap, you become untouchable. Disrespect is always a test, not of your tolerance, but of your awareness. Most men think they win by confronting it, by clapping back, by asserting dominance. But the man who truly wins is the one who sees the invitation and declines it, not from fear, but from clarity, because his energy is too valuable to hand out. His presence is too disciplined to be disrupted. He's not avoiding conflict, he's selecting his battlefield. And 99% of the time, that battlefield isn't even worth stepping onto. So let them speak, let them project, let them stir the pot, let them drown in their own chaos. You don't move, you don't fold, you don't react, you stay composed, not because you're suppressing, but because you're commanding. And that command, that silent, sharp, sovereign command of self, that is masculinity, not built in gyms, not proven in fights, but forged in the quiet moments where you could have lost control and didn't. That is what earns trust. That is what earns respect. That is what earns legacy. Not how you flex when things go your way, but how still you remain when everything tries to pull you out of your frame and fails. The man who argues is still playing the game, still seeking validation, still proving, performing, participating in energy that belongs beneath him. He wants to win. But by the time he's raising his voice, defending his name, trying to teach a lesson, he's already lost something far greater than the argument. He's lost himself. Because when you argue, you're admitting that your state is up for grabs, that your energy is reactive, that your peace is dependent on how others treat you. And a man who gives his power away like that, he may feel strong in the moment, but it's borrowed strength, temporary, loud, fragile. The man who walks away doesn't walk out of weakness. He walks out of completion. He's already won, not because he beat the other person, but because he refused to be baited, because he saw the test for what it was: a distraction, an invitation to descend into noise, into chaos, into ego. And instead of stepping in, he chose stillness. He chose clarity over closure, direction over drama, peace over proving. And that choice, that calm, clean, unwavering choice, is the move most men are too insecure to make, because it requires real power. Not the kind that dominates others, but the kind that governs self. You do not need to explain your worth. That's what men do when they don't believe they're enough, when they still need others to reflect their value back to them. But if you know your value, you live it, you walk in it. You become so rooted in it that silence becomes your shield, absence becomes your message, and presence becomes your reward, not something you hand out, but something others earn. Because energy that is freely available is never respected, but energy that is controlled, clean, and scarce, that energy reorders the room, without effort, without words. You don't need to destroy someone who disrespects you. That's ego. That's emotional immaturity masked as strength. You don't need revenge. You don't need a louder voice. You don't need to outmaneuver them in front of an audience. You leave. You remove your attention, your presence, your energy. And that absence will teach them everything your words never could. It will expose what they never saw when you were still giving, still explaining, still showing up. Because people don't learn from being told, they learn from what they can no longer touch. We live in a world addicted to reaction, to opinion, to noise. Everyone has something to say. Everyone's in a rush to be heard. But the man who doesn't play that game, the man who speaks little, moves slow, and guards his energy like a king guards his kingdom, that man is felt, not noticed, felt. His calm cuts deeper than confrontation. His restraint hits harder than retaliation. Because his stillness is not empty. It's earned. It's trained. It's the result of knowing that you don't need to control every room, you only need to control yourself. Stillness is rebellion. In a world that rewards chaos, it is the rarest discipline, and the men who master it, they don't just win battles, they end them before they begin. Because you can't fight what won't engage. You can't move what won't flinch. You can't break a man who isn't holding on to anything for you to take. So let the noise rage. Let the ego push. Let the world try to provoke you into becoming a version of yourself that no longer exists. You remain still. Not because you're emotionless, but because you've mastered direction. And the men who master direction, master the game.